All babies born this year will be the first of Generation Beta.
Generation Beta. Generation Beta.
So it seems we're talking about Generation Beta. The babies born in January of 2025 not only miss their parents' a tax write-off, but are also possibly the first members of Generation Beta rather than Gen Alpha, which came before them. Or we'll see. And depending on when they were born, they also possibly missed the cutoff for the Year of the Dragon. I've been seeing a lot of talk on it, so I figured I should make a video on it. Yes, it's early. We'll talk about that later. If 2025 actually does end up being the year that is more widely used as the cutoff, that would mean there are now 3 generations following millennials.
I'm not old enough to have this many gens behind.
That means if you're a millennial having children right now, the generational separation is similar to as if your parents were a member of the silent generation. Of course, the amount of years per generation varies, so it doesn't work perfectly, but let's get into a discussion of Generation Beta. So what do we know about this alleged Generation Beta? I'm going to talk about the name and the years, but first let's talk about some predictions about the generation. Or a better way to put it could be what is currently being predicted about babies being born today. Keep in mind it's super hard for us to know what their lives will really be like in the future. Think back to when you were born. Imagine the adults of that time predicting what your life was going to be like. How wrong do you think they would have been? Could they have imagined the technology that has developed over your lifetime? Would they have predicted the world events that have occurred? The leaders who have risen to power? I mean, maybe if they watched The Simpsons. Could they have imagined the job you do now and how you do it? Do they even know what you do now? Let's keep these questions in mind as we speculate about the coming generations. So one prediction that will likely have some accuracy to it, at least in the short term, is the global shift in population, because we see that happening right now. If we apply Gen Beta globally, we are going to see a lot more babies born in Africa and less in Europe and Asia. That's because at this time, fertility rates are highest in Africa and lowest in Europe and Asia, and seemingly the Caribbean. Some of the countries with the lowest birth rates, like South Korea and Japan, are offering citizens some incentives such as monthly allowances, expanded childcare services, and even assistance with fertility treatments. But so far, these rates remain low. According to the World Economic Forum, Asia's Gen Beta population will be smaller but richer. I assume the richer prediction has to do with more higher income people being the ones to reproduce, and also the fact that people are having less children means they have more resources to devote to the children that they do have. But I'm not sure. A sociology professor in Canada says this of Canadian Gen Betas. This is the generation of children who are less likely to have children. She said, some of these children may also not even have cousins. Smaller families are a general prediction for this generation. And part of that could be because she also mentions that millennials and Gen Z are having children at a later age. Troy suggests that this may be contributing positively to them from a socioeconomic perspective, though. One downside she mentions is that they will be younger when their parents are aging. The World Economic Forum also indicates that Gen Beta may be the first generation from which we will see higher global spending coming from low and middle income countries as opposed to high income countries. Another continuing demographic trend mentioned by the World Economic Forum is urbanization. As the generations go on, the prediction is that even more people will be living in cities as opposed to rurally. The WEF predicts 50% of Gen Beta will be living in cities by 2040. In terms of other predictions, of course, many are related to technology, with AI being kind of a hot topic right now. Mark McCrindle, the guy who named both Gen Alpha and Gen Beta, says AI will play a big role in their lives. It will be connected to appliances, it will be helping with health diagnoses, they may experience autonomous transportation at a larger scale. He said, it is thought that it will be fully embedded into everyday life. According to Canadian demographer Michael Hahn, Generation Beta is going to have AI baked right into their anatomy of how they handle, deal with, and solve problems. This is probably something we're all seeing with Gen Alpha right now. Hahn did call AI the Wild West right now, comparing it to the early days of the internet, and said we really don't know where it's going to go. And I agree with that. Another thing McCrindle says is that betas will be taught by teachers who have been informed by AI. Some of today's Gen Alpha could be Gen Beta's teachers. But AI can be a way that people are also continuing to learn regardless of age. Another prediction is that Gen Beta will spend 2.4 times as much on electronics than Generation X. At the same time, I see so much talk of limiting screen time and technology in kids. I guess the question is, how much is that actually being done? Does limitation just mean not 24/7? We'll see. And then some other predictions include that Gen Beta will live longer, have more formal education, and will be more community focused and collaborative. Personally, I wouldn't bet money on these, but we'll see. There's also a prediction that they will be more globally minded, which I could see based on current trends, but I can also see things going another way. Okay, so let's back up a little. Who belongs to Gen Beta? Back in 2020, I made a video titled, Does Gen Alpha exist? Because generally generations are not better established until all of the members are born, and even then, usually a while after that. And so from that perspective, to talk about Gen Beta now kind of seems ridiculous. But in this case, the person and firm that started this conversation isn't using experiences to define the generation, but rather sets of years. Mark McCrindle, the Australian demographer and futurist who named Gen Alpha and Gen Beta, and the ones that come after them, wants to use set periods of 15 years for the generations, rather than trying to fit them roughly into a time-year period while also factoring in external events and experiences. And that is part of why he uses the years he does and is already talking about Gen Beta. And everyone else who's talking about this generation is only talking about it because he did first. But like I said, because of this, McCrindle hasn't just defined Generation Beta. He is saying that Gen Beta will be born between 2025 and 2039, and then Gen Gamma will be born between 2040 and 2054, and Generation Delta will be born between 2055 and 2069. The world is very complicated, and so I do see his perspective with these years. The fact that it looks like Pew Research Center may not continue to define generations in the same way they had before, like how they chose to end Gen Z based on some analysis of different events and things, kind of makes me wonder if we are going to have a reputable source that is going to use those previous methods. So if that's the case, it's possible we really will end up using McCrindle's years, and Gen Beta really will start in 2025. But McCrindle is Australian, and the years he uses are already off from the typical, let's just say, American years. His firm has Gen X ending in 79, Millennials ending in 94, and Z in 09. So decent chance here in the US, we would push back the years a little bit, meaning the generation following Gen Alpha would start later than 2025, or Gen Alpha would be a particularly small generation here. I do see advantages of having each generation a set number of years, but when you think about just Gen Alpha, that would mean it will have members who were in school during the pandemic and also members who will learn about it as history. Obviously, that's just one event, but it's a major one. I don't really know what the plan would have been in defining the years around that. Maybe that is why Pew is giving up. Just kidding, half kidding. Anyway, things can always change, and maybe someone else will come out and decide to do their own evaluation. And McCrindle made a good point that by naming and talking about these future generations, hopefully that will connect us to them and the future that they are going to have. And so maybe we can think about their future. That could be a positive approach. And it's still kind of fun to think about future generations. Now for a little bit on the name. Part of why we are talking about this generation / potential generation is we have something to call it, at least for the time. But in this case, the name is a little bit of a touchy subject at the moment. The New York Post writes, "Every new generation bears a stigma. Could this one be the worst?" The term beta in this case comes from the Greek alphabet, but it is also currently used as slang to refer to someone who is a bit more passive or weak, often with a negative connotation. But it could just be due to our current culture that is often what people think of first. Maybe in the future it will be the same, but with a positive connotation. Or maybe people will think of the beta fish, which is actually quite aggressive. Or maybe people will think of the real origin, the Greek alphabet. Or maybe people will just think of the generation. McCrindle says he thought that using the Greek alphabet for the generations after Gen Z could be sort of symbolic to represent not just the new generations, but that they would be shaped by a different world. Gen Alpha is, by most interpretations, the first generation to be fully born in the 21st century. Some people think the Gen Beta name will still be a placeholder, and that is possible. 5 years ago, when I first started making some videos on Gen Alpha, I did wonder if that name was going to stick, but so far it has. So we'll see with Gen Beta, it could stick as well. Even if Gen Alpha continues to hold, it doesn't mean Gen Beta will, though. We've seen an alphabetic name transition in the recent past where a letter essentially ended up getting skipped. That's when we went from Gen X to Gen Y to Gen Z. Gen Y at some point transition into being millennials. Now, there was some overlap in the use of both, and even today, some people will still use Gen Y, but millennials is definitely the more dominant name for the generation following Gen X. So we could see something like that as well. The world's a little different now, and so are the way that generations are talked about, though, just with the internet and everything. So we'll see. If you don't like the name, though, start thinking about other options and feel free to write them below in the comments. Although it's kind of hard when we're talking about babies that we know barely anything about right now. And in the reality, they may not even be born. Gen Beta may not even start in 2025, at least in the US. I do hope this was helpful in your understanding of the current conversations around Generation Beta. Give a thumbs up if so, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. So I did film this a few months ago, but I've been working on my own little beta, or maybe alpha, we'll see. I hope you all are well. I should hopefully have more videos. I will see you. What is that sound? It's really weird.